Hello everyone. Very good morning to you all. I'm Reshma from MES Mumbai College. I hope that everyone watching this video are really doing fine out there. And I'm so happy that at least a few of you have come forward to use this lockdown time in an effective way. Although I know that the online classes won't be as effective as the face-to-face interactions, but these do have a little advantages, right? Like you can watch it anytime you want, and you can even re-watch it when you have doubts, which you can't do in a live class. So I would like to appreciate AKPCTA for providing us such a wonderful platform for teachers and students to interact and complete the portions that were pending due to the sudden lockdown and stuffs. And I would like to thank Somina ma'am for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this venture. So I actually decided to take this video with my face on was to apologize to you on a small note. I don't know how many of you have gone through the notes that were sent to you yesterday. My handwriting was really small, and I've tried my maximum to make it bigger so that you can read it. If you find it difficult at any point to read any part of it, please let me know. I'll definitely help you to read it out. I'll read it out for you during the interactive session. Please do ask, don't hesitate. So with that, I think we'll move on to the topic that we are discussing today. You might have seen the topic. It is a very simple but relevant and basic topic in vector calculus, which is vector valued functions and space curves. So before moving on to the topic directly, I'd like to give you a simple advice, which is nothing but whatever you're going to learn in vector calculus is actually something you might have already learned in with real valued functions. So with vector valued functions are actually a general approximation of real valued functions that you've already learned. So before moving on to vector valued functions, let me ask you a simple question, which is, what do you mean by real valued functions? If you know that clearly, then defining a vector valued functions won't be a task. So I hope you know that. Well, real valued functions are actually something that you've already learned, like f of x is equal to x, f of t is equal to t square, everything that those values, those functions are actually real valued functions. And it's called real valued function because for any input that we give, we get an output which is a real value. Okay, and real value in the sense it's a real number, right? If we get an output as a real number, it's called a real valued function. Then of course, what will be a vector valued function? With that kept in mind, of course, if we give any input, if we get a vector as an answer, then that will be a vector valued function. So that's the simple thing that you have to keep in mind when you hear about vector valued functions. Okay, so how are they actually connected to space curves? That's what we're going to learn of. And in this session, we'll be dealing with vector valued functions and how they are related to space curves. And we'll be learning about limits, continuity, differentiability, and integration of vector valued functions. So you might have already learned limits, derivatives, integrals, and continuity of real valued functions. As I already told you, these are just approximations or generalizations of those things that you've learned in real valued functions. So we'll see to it as we move on in the session. So we'll see to it. We'll get into the topic. For understanding how a vector valued function works for a space curve, just think about yourself. Imagine that you are standing on top of a high mountain, and you have wings, and you're deciding to fly. You are going to fly. Okay, so when you're moving, your position changes, right? So before you start flying, the position where you're standing stationary, we can regard it as the origin of the three axes, the origin of the space, right? origin of that is the point 0, 0, 0, which we denote as the origin of the space, with x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis along with it, right? Okay, now you're moving, you're going to fly, you're jumping off the cliff, and you have 3 friends with you who are evaluating your changes. One friend is evaluating the change in your position with respect to x-axis, the other one is evaluating your change in your position with respect to y, and the other one with respect to z. And 3 come up with 3 functions. As the time moves on, your position keeps changing, and you keep moving away from x-axis or towards x-axis or whatever it is. So your position actually changes, right, until you come up to rest. So your first friend will come up with a position with a function f of t, which is your changes with respect to x-axis, changes in your position with respect to x-axis, and that is the changes in your x coordinate, right? Initially it was 0, and then you have moved to some other position which has some other value, right? So you have a function f of t with you, changes with respect to x-axis, and you have a function g of t with you, which your second friend gives you, which is your changes with respect to y-axis, and you have a function h of t, which is your changes with respect to z-axis. So you have 3 functions in hand, which are f of t, g of t, and h of t, which are real valued functions, right? So you have 3 real valued functions in hand. Now we'll see how it is connected to vectors, okay? So, we'll consider the 3-dimensional space. This can be regarded as the y-axis, and this is the z-axis, and this one as the x-axis. And now suppose you have a curve of this sort, and now we have seen that with respect to x, y, and z-axis we have 3 functions, 3 real valued functions, which is f of t, g of t, and h of t. The changes in position, regarding this one as the initial point or something, the curve moves on. As we trace the path of these functions with respect to a particular time interval, we'll get a curve, of course. We can sketch the curve, right? Now, for the vector part, we join the origin to this particular point P. Then what is this line segment? Of course, we regard it as the position vector OP, and that is what we take as r of t from now on as a position vector, which can be regarded as f of t I plus g of t j plus h of t k, where you might be very familiar with I, j, and k vectors. They are the unit vectors denoting the directions, right? Now we'll go through the formal definition of the same. When a particle moves through the space during a time interval I, we think of the particle's coordinate as functions defined on I, as we said earlier. So x is equal to f of t, y is equal to g of t, and z is equal to h of t, where t is taken from a particular interval. Now the position vector, particle's position vector, is denoted as like this. R of t will be taken as f of t I plus g of t j plus h of t k. I think that's clear for you. Now we'll move on that's all with the formal definition of a vector relating to a space curve. So we'll move on to the definition of limits and continuity of a vector valued function. For that, just think about how you defined limits of a real valued function. So suppose we have a real valued function f of t in hand, and how do we define limit t tends to t naught f of t? Okay, suppose this has a value small l, then by epsilon delta definition we can define this limit as for every epsilon greater than 0, there exists a delta greater than 0 such that mode f of t minus L less than epsilon whenever mode t minus t naught less than delta. This is what the formal definition of a real valued function's limit that you might have already learned, right? We define the limit of a vector valued function in a similar way. Just look at this. If r of t is f of ti plus g of tj plus h of tk, there is only a single difference in it. For f of t as a real valued function, we just saw a definition. Here we have three real valued functions. So we'll have to find limits of it separately. And that's all we have to do. So by definition, if limit t tends to t naught r of t should be L, it's a vector. You should note that. In case of real valued function, the limit was a real number. In case of vector valued function, the limit will be a vector, where L will be taken as L1 plus L1i plus L2j plus L3k, where L1 is the limiting value of f of t as t tends to t naught, and L2 will be the limiting value of g of t as t tends to t naught, and L3 will be the limiting value of h of t as t tends to 0. So by formal definition, if for every epsilon greater than 0, there exists a corresponding number delta greater than 0, such that for all t 0 less than mod t minus t naught less than delta implies r of t minus L less than epsilon, just like what we saw in a real valued function, where I already told about L1, L2, L3. L is a vector and these are the three components, and here it is there, limit t tends to t naught f of t is equal to L1. That will be the first component of the limiting value of r of t as t tends to t naught, and L2 will be the second component, which will be the limiting value of g of t as t tends to t naught, and similar is the case with h of t. But all you have to keep in mind while doing a problem is that if you have to find the limiting value as t tends to t naught of a vector valued function, all you have to do is find the limiting value of the individual components as t tends to t naught, and just give the the direction vectors along with it. That's all you have to keep in mind. We'll see a problem done with it. Here r of t is cos ti plus sin tj plus tk. Then we have to evaluate limit t tends to pi by 4 r of t. Just pause the video and try doing it yourself. It's very simple. All you have to do is that you have to find the limits as limits of these individual components as t tends to pi by 4. Here it is limit t tends to pi by 4 cos ti plus limit t tends to pi by 4 sin tj, and limit t tends to pi by 4 tk. So the values are given like this, and the denominators are rationalized, and we get the final answer. I hope it's clear for you. Now we'll move on to the continuity of a vector valued function. It is nothing but the same as we learned just before. Like if the individual components have a limit, then r of t has a limit too, as t tends to t naught, right? So if the individual components are continuous, then r of t can also be regarded as continuous function with when the limit t tends to t naught. So a function is continuous if it is continuous at every point in its domain, and a vector function is continuous at a point t tends to t naught in its domain if limit t tends to t naught, r of t tends to r of t naught. We have learned this case with a real valued function as. So in case of a real valued function, if limit t tends to t naught, f of t is equal to L, and this L is f of t naught, then we can say that the function f of t is continuous at the point t naught, right? So if r of t is taken as f of ti plus g of tj plus h of tk, it is said to be continuous at t is equal to t naught only if f of t, g of t and h of t, which are real valued functions, should be continuous at t equal to t naught. If they are continuous, if these individual components are continuous at t is equal to t naught, then we can say that r of t, the vector valued function r of t, is also continuous at t is equal to t naught. So that's all you have to check whether if you're given a question to check whether a function is continuous or not, all you have to check is whether the individual components are continuous at that point or not. So here we have an example. R of t is equal to cos ti plus sin tj plus tk, where cos t, sin t and t, these three component functions are continuous for any t. So we can take r of t as a continuous vector valued function. So I think we'll discuss about derivatives and derivatives in our next next video. So see you.